Well, y'all, where we're at right now, many of you been with the channel a long time will recognize it. This is my south side garden bed. Of course, it don't look like much of a garden bed. And like always, there's reasons for that. I decided this year that I wasn't going to plant much, if anything. And then I decided I'd plant a little bit, even though I was really late. And back in June, I bought some plants from Superfoods. And they're right over here. Yep, and even from this distance, they're not looking too pretty. But there's reasons for it. So let me show you what I got on these 2 tomato plants and 3 pepper plants. And we'll start here. These are 2 Better Boy indeterminate tomatoes. And you can see down here the lower leaves turned yellow, they wilted, and they died. Yep. Looks pretty bad, don't it? Looks almost hopeless. But I want you to hopefully look closely at that leaf. You're going to see some little small brown spots. Yep. So you have to look close to start to get an idea of what you got. You can see the same thing here. Little bitty tiny brown to black spots, and the leaf starting to yellow. This leaf will die. This one a little further up has them as well. Then we come over to the pepper plants. The same is starting to happen. You can see those little small circles and yellowing of the leaves. Now, one thing I want to stop and say right here, if this is all about tomato diseases, then why am I going to be talking about peppers as well? Well, maybe I should rename the video to nightshade diseases. Because if you don't know, tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, but so are all peppers and eggplants. And many, if not all, the same diseases can affect all 3. So once you got it on one, you may want to start treating all your nightshades. I'm just saying. It's what I do. So what is this? Is it early blight? No, it's not. And what gives it away are those little spots. But see, it has some of the same characteristics. It starts at the bottom. The leaves will yellow, then die, progresses up the plant. But there are differences to blights and leaf spot diseases. And knowing those differences can guide you to treating them and knowing just what part of your plant's going to be affected by it. Is it just going to be the leaves, or is it going to be the leaves and the fruit? Very important. Now, can we treat this? Can these plants survive? Well, you may be saying right now, well, look pretty hopeless, Mr. Tom. I just throw them away. Well, I've seen people do that. And I've seen people go into their gardens and pull up everything they got. I've also seen that they misidentified, and had they followed or known exactly what they were dealing with, they could have saved their plants. Yep, would have took some time, would have took effort, and a little bit of cash, but it could have been done. Now we're going to go on in and we're going to dive deep like we do, and I'm going to show you a little bit about leaf spot and blight diseases. And this is going to be, like I say, it's going to have to be a 2-part tomato disease or nightshade disease series, because we're only going to be talking about 3 today that are very prevalent in wet weather and high humidity environments. And the 3 we're going to talk about today There's early blight, Spatoria leaf spot, which I clearly have right here, and late blight. So come on in. Let's dive deep.
So here we are. And where are we at? Well, I really do like this site because it helps the old man remember, because sometimes my memory's not great, just what I'm dealing with. Plus, it's got really nice pictures, which really help you identify diseases, whether they're fungal, bacterial, or viral, in all things tomatoes. Which, like I said, this ain't only about tomatoes. This is about all your nightshades in your garden. Tomatoes, peppers, and those eggplants. Tomatoes and peppers being most important to most people. So, we're right here at tomatodirt.com. And you can see right here different kinds of tomato blight and how to tell them apart. And you say, well, Mr. Tom, I thought we were going to talk some about Spatoria leaf spot. Well, we are. We're going to talk about that too, because it's included in this, which is a good thing. Because, like I told you, people misidentify. They say they've got early blight. They don't know what to do, so they rip out all their plants, when they may have had Spatoria leaf spot. Then again, they'll say it's late blight when it's early in the season, and you're going to learn all about when to identify these fungal diseases and when they're most prevalent in the season, which is another very important aspect. I mean, in the early part of the season, the chances you got late blight are almost slim to none. And you'll be seeing that once we scroll down a little more. And you can see right here, and they're going to tell you, they're each caused by different funguses. You can tell these three problems apart by what they look like, what parts of the tomato they affect, and when their symptoms appear. See? Very important. But the good news is this: all three can be treated and controlled similarly with biofungicides or fungicides by practicing good preventative care. And you see they're including early blight, late blight, and Spatoria leaf spot. But let's just click right here first. And this is why I love this site so much. See? Got three big giant pictures. So we can really see, especially us old folk, just exactly what we're dealing with. And the first one here to the left says early blight. Now, what are you looking at? You're looking at these brown spots. They're not ever going to be perfectly round. Some will be, some won't. And you're going to see that in early blight, it spreads. Parts of the leaves are turning yellow, then they'll turn brown and die, and then the whole entire leaf will turn yellow, die, and fall off. The second one they have here that they're showing is late blight. See the difference between early blight? It starts out with the small spots, and they're not that small. They're 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch primarily, and that's important to understand too. And they spread. Now, late blight, which is a mid to late season blight, I might add, where early blight is an early season blight, spring, early summer, where late blight is midsummer to late throughout the fall. And you can clearly see the difference here if you look closely. This is brown and dead looking. This has a grayish, fuzzy, and lighter brown appearance. See that? It looks like it's growing fuzz, just like you would expect from a mildew or a fungus. Now, it's not mildew. It is definitely caused by a fungus. Then you're going to see something that I showed you out here on my plants, right here. See the little spots? See how much smaller these spots are? They can be tiny to just slightly larger. You can see the leaf yellow. I mean, we were clearly seeing that on my Better Boy tomatoes and my pepper plants. So these three large pictures can help you identify exactly what you have. So now, we're going to come back over here. And they show you smaller photos, but like I just showed you the larger photos. And then it goes over the causes. Early blight's a fungus. I'm not going to try to pronounce the scientific name because I just don't do well at that. Late blight is also fungus, fungal diseases. And then, of course, Photoria is a fungus disease as well. Then it gives you the characteristics down here. On early blight, you're going to have dark concentric spots, 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and that's very important to realize and understand what the size of these spots and how that determines exactly what you have, whether you have a blight or a leaf spot. And they'll be on the lower leaves and the stems. You'll see them on the stems. They'll look a little elongated. Spots on the fruit near the stems. This is another extremely important characteristic, especially as the disease progresses in your plant and up through it and starts infecting the plant clusters, i.e. tomato clusters. So early blight's definitely going to affect the fruit. It's going to make it look rather unpalatable and not so tasty looking. And the lower leaves yellow and drop. The parts affected are the leaf stems and the fruit. Now the timing, which I told you was real important to understanding what you're dealing with. Because I've seen several this year misidentify early blight or Photoria leaf spot as late blight. And I'm talking April, May, early June time period. No, it wasn't late blight. And see, it's early to mid-season in wet weather. Now I might add, it's also very prevalent in the southeast, where we have high humidity environments all the time, every day, every day, every day. And this early blight has been really strong this year and quite widespread. Why? Because this has been an extremely wet year. Now we're always humid, so your chances of getting early blight in the south, especially deep south, are extremely high. The next it shows you is late blight. Here again, it's a fungal disease. But see here the coloring? Blue to gray spots on the leaves which turn brown. And this brings up an important point. You got to be out there every day looking at your plants to see these things developing, to properly identify them, and to know how to properly treat them. And then the next thing that happens, it starts dropping leaves. Then you're going to have irregular brown greasy spots on the fruit, and they look nasty. You'll know them when you got them. An irregular brown and greasy spots on the fruit, white mold rings on the spots. So if you've ever got spots on your tomatoes, they're still not quite ripe, you're letting them ripen, you see the soft spots start to form, and then you see a white mold ring around it. Oh yeah, you got late blight. Parts affected of the plant are the leaves, the stem, and the fruit. Now when does late blight come into play? Mid to late season. Now this is going to vary depending on where you live. Here in the deep south, mid-season would be, for most places this far south where I'm at, and down into the coastal plains, is going to be sometime in June through early July into late summer and late fall. Whereas early blight's going to be starting, depending on where you're at, anywhere from late March throughout April, May, and early June. Now what do I have? Well, I have this Photoria leaf spot, and you're going to see why. It's also a fungal disease. Small black or brown spots on the lower leaves. And you could clearly see them on my tomato and pepper plants. They were small, much smaller. They weren't a 1/4 inch and they weren't a 1/2 inch. Here again, these are how you recognize leaf spot from the blights. Lower leaves yellow and drop. Now if you notice on all 3 of these fungal diseases, the lower leaves will yellow and drop off. But unlike the first 2, which were blights, the only part affected of your tomato will be the leaves and the stem. And all 3 of these fungal diseases will start at the base of the plant because they reside in the soil. And they'll progress up the plant. And if you do absolutely nothing, it will kill your plant. No doubt. Now, when do we get Spatoria leaf spot? Early to mid-season. And Spatoria leaf spot, just like you saw in those plants out there, that Spatoria leaf spot started coming on the week I set them down there and started neglecting them. Did it have anything to do with that? Oh no. It was already in my soul. And here's another aspect. Let's say you're just getting in the garden and you've never planted tomatoes on your piece of ground and nobody around you. Maybe you're in an urban environment or a suburban environment. And you say, well, there were absolutely no tomatoes or even peppers. Nobody gardens in my area. How come I got it? Well, it could have been residing in your soil because native nightshade varieties will host these diseases as well. Yep. And there are several. So you can look into that. Get pictures of them. Go out in your yard, your half acre or acre or whatever you got, and see what's out there. And then come up with a game plan to get that eradicated. Now, another aspect of how you can get infected by this, especially if nobody in your area even grows tomatoes no more or hasn't that you know of since you've been living there, so you feel it's totally impossible to get it, but you did. Here's a fact. All fungal diseases, they're a fungus among us. And just like mushrooms and other forms of fungi, they produce spores. Oh yeah, they surely do. And you may not know, or you may, that these spores can be picked up by the breezes and winds and carried. And it has been found that these fungal spores can be carried up to 30 miles. Think about that. And what happens during the growing season? Everybody starts growing, starting in the southernmost part of their countries. Well, we border Mexico. They start growing way ahead of us. Well, not way, but ahead. And then you've got the coastal states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. They all start growing even before people in Tennessee, the Carolinas, and people in the central Midwest. So we all start growing. We all have these problems. A lot of people don't treat them. It's in the native environment. It produces spores. The winds pick it up, and it actually will migrate, just like birds do, from south to north. Yep. Universities have found this to be true. So, if it ain't in your ground, nobody's ever grown tomatoes that you have ever seen in your suburban or urban neighborhood, you can still get it. And it's still probably there, residing on nightshade host plants and in your soils. So you might say, well, in years like this year, now it's going to be more of a problem in high humidity, like I said, and in wet weather seasons or years. like we're having right here in the southeast this year. So what do? Do you just go out in your garden and tear it all up? Throw everything away? Throw in the towel? Or do you go to the old gardener toolbox, grab a few tools, or gardening weapons, as I've called them in teaching in person, and head on out and get it under control? Now what I'm going to go to now and show you is just how I deal with fungal diseases, and not only fungal diseases, but bacterial diseases. And to do that, we got to head on back out to where those sad looking plants are. And we got to start treating their problems and giving them some tender love and care. Okay? I'll leave a link to tomatodirt.com for you below the description of this video, and maybe you'll save it and you'll use it in the future to refresh your mind or help your old eyes out. So come on, let's head her on back outside and let's treat some diseases. Okay, we're back out at the south side driveway bed again, and you can see I've got some things laid out. I've got a little small half-gallon sprayer here, pump up, that I like to use, especially when things are small. And I've got a few bottles of things here, and I'm going to go through each and every one of them. Okay, some are chemical and synthetic, some are natural and organic, and some that actually are natural and organic are yet to be recognized that way, even though they persist in the natural environment and in nature. So the first thing I want to discuss, and something I've had great success ever since with my father, when things really get out of control, and yeah, it's a chemical, it's synthetic, made by man, engineers and scientists. That don't bother me. Now, it is Daconil, and it's a plant disease control multi-purpose fungicide. It's made by Ortho, but there are several different brands out there. And indeed, this will not only treat, i.e. kill, but prevent the three things we've been discussing today: early blight, late blight, and what I'm currently dealing with, Spistoria leaf spot. Now, whether you want to use a chemical or synthetic, that's totally up to you. I will and have, but I use it responsibly. I read the directions and use it accordingly. And then I follow a spray schedule. And everything we're going to discuss today has a schedule that you must keep if you want to have any success in fighting fungal diseases. So, this is sort of like my big gun in my garden toolkit. When things really get rather out of control, I'm going to turn the Daconil. I'm going to make sure I follow the directions, you know, because there is a time that you must wait after you apply it before you harvest. And then, of course, I think we all thoroughly wash our beds. I know I do. So this is my top choice right here when things all go wild. We'll place it on over here. Another choice that I will use preliminarily and is organic is liquid copper fungicide. Yep. It's right here. Here again, there are many brands. Will this treat and prevent blights and Spistoria leaf spot? Oh yeah, it surely will. If used per the directions, and if you maintain that spraying schedule. So this might be something that you would like to use, especially if you're trying to be all organic. One of my best sayings is, I try to be organic until I can't.
Hey Spook, you over here to check out things? Another one, and this is totally organic. Sorry that my containers are a little scrungy looking. They stay outside underneath the carport because I use them. And you're going to hear this come up so many times for just about everything. I even think it may, prevent cancer. And this is neem oil, or neem oil. And you can see, maybe you can't, because it's nasty. It's a botanical insecticide concentrate, insect growth regulator, insect growth inhibitor, insect repellent, insect feeding inhibitor, adult insect reproductive inhibitor and disruptor. So you might say, Mr. Tom, what's that got anything to do with fungal diseases? Well, let me tell you. Now you got to use neem a certain way. Is it going to kill a fungus? No, not. But it can prevent them if you do it at the right timing. I have, and it's worked out. But here again, you got to keep this stuff on your plants. So what do I mean by that? I mean, as soon as your plants come up, you got to make sure they have neem on them at the proper mixing dilutions. Very important. And what neem actually does, since it is an oil, is it puts a protective coating on the leaves and stems. Here again, you got to do full coverage on the plant. Now something I'll say about the neem oil and the liquid copper fungicide, as well as the daconel, all three of these should not be sprayed when your plants are in direct sunlight or going to be in direct sunlight before this dries, any of them. Otherwise you could have some tip yellowing and browning, or you can kill the leaves and possibly kill the plant. So don't do it. Just wait till it's overcast, or wait till the sun is down to a point where it's not on the plants that you want to spray. I normally spray in the late afternoon to early evening hours, giving me enough time to allow the plants to dry before nightfall comes. Now I already know some people are going to say, well, if you just take the lower leaves off where the soil can't jump up on them, and then the fungus can't get on the plant. Remember, I already showed you both early blight, late blight, and Spatoria leaf spot not only affect the leaves, but affect the stems. That stem that goes all the way down in the ground. Imagine that. So by just taking the lower leaves off, you ain't doing nothing. Now something I do, and it is also natural, although it has yet to be rated certified organic, I don't know why, is I use and have used ever since my dad did his experiments with it based on what my grandfather came up with, is I use hydrogen peroxide right here. Yeah, it's cheap. This is 3% solution from, I believe, good old Walmart. Or it used to be cheap before we had the virus. So, what do? I use the hydrogen peroxide not as a preventative, because it's not. Hydrogen peroxide has one purpose. It will kill fungal diseases on contact. Oh yes, it will. Just like when you put it on a cut or a scrape, it's known to kill bacteria. It does the same thing with fungal diseases and bacterial diseases in your garden. Now here again, you got to be careful with this. And you got to mix the appropriate amount per the appropriate amount of water. And I've actually seen that once it's applied, very next day, where I had those little brown spots that you saw, come back next day and where the brown spots were, there were actually tiny holes in the leaves. Now I want you to think about this. This is how hydrogen peroxide works. It's a chemical reaction whenever it's taken out of this bottle, exposed to atmosphere. You know, all that bubbling and foaming? Yeah. Yep, that's it. And what's happening then, because what hydrogen peroxide is, it's basically water, slightly different. You know, water, we all got taught in school, was H2O. That's 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen. Well, hydrogen peroxide is nothing more than 2 hydrogen atoms with 2 oxygen atoms. Yeah, it's water with an extra oxygen atom. And what happens? When you put this on your plants or put this on a wound or cut or what have you, is it's that oxidation that happens that actually kills the bacteria or the fungal disease. Now, here again, this does not need to be applied during direct sunlight. So none of them do. You can try it. Maybe you get by with it. But I've never had good success. So, if this is not a preventive, why am I going to use it? Well, this is a rapid killer. It's definitely going to kill that Spatoria leaf spot today. Now, like I told you, Daconil, liquid copper fungicide, they'll not only treat it and kill it, they'll prevent it. So you might say, well, why do I want to use this? Well, I found, especially liquid copper fungicide, takes a minute. Next is the Daconil. But this here hydrogen peroxide, oh, within a few minutes, even though it won't look like it, that Spatoria leaf spot's going to be dead. And that's what I want to do. So I can give those little plants some fertilization and get them ready to go in the garden tomorrow. Now I've developed a formula here for it that I've used for several years. It's proven effective. Now I will caution you on this before you do use it. Test a leaf or 2 or 3 on your plants. If you're sort of timid, don't go out there and just pour it on. And you gotta use sense when you're measuring this all out. It just can't be haphazard. Okay? So, we're going to get to mixing some of this up, and this will kill it off. Probably before I get done. And if not, within 3 to 5 minutes, Spatoria leaf spot will be dying and on the ropes. Now what will I do next, since this will not prevent it from coming back? Well, that's when I'm going to come back and I'm going to hit it with a mixture of liquid copper fungicide. Okay? This is my preventative. This is going to be my shield. Now, if it progresses to the point that the liquid copper fungicide won't deal with it, then I'll step it up to the Daconil. Okay? Because it's too late in the season and the plants are too far along and too infected to even waste my time or mess with the Nemo. That's my experience. That was my father's experience and my grandpa. Nemo been around a long time. Way before YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and the new organic gardening movement. Oh yeah. So, let me get to mixing all this up. Now I'll show you how to apply the hydrogen peroxide. And you know the good part about my videos is, I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you the actual results at a later date. Yes, I am. Good, bad, or ugly. So let's get to mixing. So y'all, sorry for my tripod, it's not too great. And we're going to start mixing this up. Hopefully you can see this and that. And what we're going to start with is our hydrogen peroxide. Yep. And what I have developed that I use here is I use 12 tablespoons per gallon. Now this is a half-gallon sprayer. So I only need 6, right? You know, the old man gets a little shaky as he's gotten older. There's 4, there's 6. So we got our 6 tablespoons in there. Okay. Now we got to put in some water. So we're going to fill ours up to the half-gallon mark. It's just that simple. Okay. And we're just going to fill it up to the half-gallon mark, as denoted on the side of the sprayer. It's just that easy. It's not a big deal. And then we're going to put in our little spray top. Okay. Tighten her on up. And we got us a half a gallon of hydrogen peroxide at 3% mixed with a half gallon of water. So all we got left to do now is pump it up. I love my little sprayer for small jobs. Oh, I've got a big one. Okay, we got her all pumped up. We're going to give her a good shaking too. Okay? Now, we're going to get over here and that. And we're going to get things out. We can sort of kind of have better access to. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to spray these plants. Yep. Every leaf. Every leaf. Okay? And we're going to wet our stems down. Okay? Oh yeah. Now we're cooking with gas. You see? We want this whole plant wet down really good in the stem. Now let me set y'all down, because I got to get underneath the leaves and all the stems, okay? Now one important thing to note is because the Victoria leaf spot, just like the blights, like I said, gets on the leaves, the stems, and the fruit. So it's very important. And this is easy when they're this small in a pot. We can get to underneath, we can turn that plant, and we can get the stems all coated. And that is killing that there leaf spot right now, right this very minute. Okay? Now this is only the first step in the spray program. Remember, the hydrogen peroxide kills the leaf spot and blights, but won't prevent it. And something I see people spraying all the time is they don't ever thoroughly get the underside of the leaves, if at all. They don't get their stems all coated, and it doesn't matter whether you're using hydrogen peroxide or using fungicides, whether it's a copper fungicide or whether it's a chemical synthetic or neem oil. I mean, think about it. Especially when you're using organics, whether it's an insecticide or fungicide, especially bugs, certain times of the day they hide out on the underside of the leaves. Yes, they do. And see, I'm hoping you can see, we're making sure to coat the underside of each leaf. We're wetting down those underside leaves. We're making sure to turn it and get the stems. Now, you might say, well, how in the Lord you going to do that when it's already in a pot? A big pot where you can't pick it up and turn it around. You know, you're going to say, Lord, how do you do that when it's in a big pot or it's in the ground? You can't just uproot it and turn it around. Well, that's when you got to have due diligence. Lift up your leaves, spray, work around your plant. Yep, you do. Now, if I've covered all this really good, it's going to be killing it. Okay? Right now. Now I'm going to plant these tomorrow. And probably Sunday or Saturday, depends. I'll come back and show you. Are they still alive? Or did they die? Now something I'm seeing right from the get-go when I told you might happen, and it's happening right here. You see? Where those spots were? Now, there are holes. Yep, sure is. And I've seen that work with this concentration before. Once that hydrogen peroxide gets exposed to the atmosphere and starts oxidizing, it heats up. I think they call it an endothermal reaction. And it literally burns that Spatoria leaf spot right out of the leaf. Now it ain't gonna burn a hole slap through your stems though. But leaves are very thin and very tender. So you ain't got to worry about burning no holes in your stems and leaves. But I mean, you may not choose to use this. Or you might want to experiment it with yourself. Remember, that's 12 tablespoons of hydrogen peroxide, 3%, to a gallon of water. I used a half gallon, so I put in 6. Now another note, and I got about 2/3 of this gallon left. Once this is mixed, goes in the sprayer, it has no shelf life at all. Here again, once hydrogen peroxide is exposed to the atmosphere, it starts working. You know, it's going to start oxidizing, whether it's on a bacterial infection or a fungal infection. So is this going to be any good in a little while? No. And that's where I've seen people make mistakes with it. They didn't realize it wasn't going to be any good when they came back to use it tomorrow, the next day, or the next week. It's not one of those things like a synthetic chemical or even neem oil. Very limited life after mixing. Now I do got my squash here. It's looking a little bit depressing, and I've used it on squash for powdery mildew, downy mildew, and those things, and it's worked well for me. Here again, killing it, not preventing it, and following proper mixing guidelines and spraying schedule. Now I got a cherry tomato over here that I've got to treat too, because you can see it right here. It's suffering the same thing, you know. But I ain't gonna have you with me when I try to get this big one, which I also need to get in the ground. So I'm gonna have to take y'all in, because it's looking like rain. And see, that's another thing I like about the hydrogen peroxide, other than the fungicides. You know, you can say, well, Tom, I used a chemical, followed the directions, sprayed, and all that, and mine still progressed, and my tomatoes or peppers or eggplants died. Yeah, they surely will. Why? For the same reason that's about to happen here any minute. You might have heard that wind kicker. Once again, we got rain about to fall. But why do I like hydrogen peroxide so well? See, the rain can go ahead and wash it off after a very short time frame, because it does its work in minutes, not in hours. And it's never meant to prevent it. And it's relatively very cheap and easy to reapply. Those fungicides, and you'll see when you go to Amazon.com, Walmart.com, oh yeah, they're pricey. That's another decision you got to make. But now, say it don't rain today. What I would do is come out in the morning before the sun's up on these plants, or set them in the compote, and I'd spray them with a mixture of that copper fungicide per label directions. Then it's got the treatment, if any more should jump on it, which then becomes the preventative. But we'll have to see what happens with the rain. But right now, that Victoria leaf spot, as you saw, is dying. Now, in finishing up, here's an important note. You can probably see what has happened. As soon as I sprayed those tomatoes and peppers and squash with that hydrogen peroxide, it started raining. And it's still raining. Yeah, sure is. So, it did have enough time to kill the Victoria leaf spot. Yes, it did. Now, if I had treated it with liquid copper fungicide, or if I had treated it with my daconil, even though it may have started killing it, it would not have had time. And even though it killed it, or was starting to, here again now, the preventative part of it, you know, because having everything coated with the daconil or liquid copper is gone. Yeah. All my hard work and all my money would now have been washed off and is now on the ground. With the hydrogen peroxide, no matter. It did its job. Trust me, it did. You can see another hole right there. Yeah. And if I could zoom in and show you real close, every little spot has holes, even if they're ever so tiny. So the hydrogen peroxide had time to work, kill it off. Now, what will I need to do is my next step? Well, tomorrow, if it's dry, I'll probably hit them again with hydrogen peroxide just to make sure nothing else jumped back on it. And as soon as that dries, I'll be spraying it with some of that copper fungicide, following label directions and spraying it at the appropriate time. And I don't know if you can see that right there. There's a little bitty tiny spot, got a hole in it too now. But see, I mean, that's what's been happening in the southeast. Now, I got a good friend, Lone Star Pioneering down in Texas. And him and his wife Teresa have been working really hard on their garden. And it was looking beautiful. But it has rained relentlessly down there. As well as in Louisiana, where I have another good friend, Southern Boy Prepper. And he's been suffering the same fate. And they go out, they spray their plants, then it rains. All that money, all that time, and all that effort down the drain. And as soon as that rain's over, if they want to continue to protect their plants, they have to come back and respray. And what's been happening down there to them is then it rains either that day or the next day or the day after. And the same pattern happens over and over. Yes, it does. So it's extremely tough when we're having all this wet weather and high humidity to continue doing that. Keep throwing money, good money, after more. But that's here again why I love the hydrogen peroxide. It can rain like it did. It wasn't more than 10 minutes, 20 minutes at the most. And it was raining rather vigorously. And yeah, the hydrogen peroxide got washed off. But it did its duty. It was done. Yep. And they're still alive. Yeah, they surely are. Yeah, they got some holes in their leaves now. But I'm okay with that. Because I already know the rest of the leaves will survive. Yeah, they will. Some of them may fall off because they're too far gone. But the ones that weren't will continue on. And you're going to get to see that when I do my next video. Okay? Yeah, it's still sprinkling. I'm getting wet. So we're going to have to go on the porch here. Okay? So y'all, there you have it. That's what I do. Now, the important takeaways. Follow the mixing instructions on any of them, whether it's hydrogen peroxide, and I would test that on your plants. Now I know it works here on what I plant and grow. I don't plant and grow every single variety, so I can't say it won't hurt some more tender variety. It could well. I haven't seen it hurt nothing that I've ever planted or grown. And it's been very effective as a killer. Remember, it's not a preventative. Second of all, never spray in direct sunlight or when the plants are going to be in direct sunlight before it dries. And you shouldn't do that really with any fungicide or insect spray. No. It's just good advice and works well for me. And that's the practice I do. And second of all, or third of all, once it rains, unlike the hydrogen peroxide, which if it's got 5, 10, 20 minutes, it's already done its job. No need to worry about reapplying it. But your regular fungicides, whether they're organic, chemical, synthetic, see, the rain's going to wash it off. And therein lies the problem. Then you're faced with this. You must reapply as soon as possible, I might add. And if it rains that day, or the next, then you still got to reapply. And you can be reapplying a lot. Now, another thing to understand is the spray schedule that's recommended for these. Generally speaking, fungicides are said they should be applied every 7 to 10 days. And people get confused on that. Well, I did that, but it rained, at some point in time earlier than that. Well, that's when they should have reapplied, not waited for 7 to 10 days. Another thing that can happen to you, especially down here with our high humidity and then our cool nights, we can have heavy dews during the spring, summer, and fall. And a heavy dew will also wash your fungicide off. Surely will. So y'all, I hope you learned something today. At least that's what I was trying to do. If you have questions, put them below in the comments. Bear with me, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. And the next episode in the tomato disease series will be, we're going to revisit these plants here in the next day or two, and we'll be reapplying probably the hydrogen peroxide to make sure if any more jumped on it, because all this rain. And then we're going to apply the copper fungicide, and that's going to be our preventative, that shield, to prevent that Spatoria leaf spot from jumping back on it. So y'all, regardless of what's happening with your gardens, you got two choices. You can throw in the towel and give up, or you can continue on. And with good practices, yeah, you can grow. Sometimes it's trying, and this year is trying a whole lot of people. Yep. And my decision not to plant a whole lot this year was based on a very cold spring, colder than we've seen in many a year, in fact in my memory, and then the fact that it has just been extremely wet. But I'm still going to give it a try, even on a limited basis, and hopefully this fall I'll expand. We'll just have to wait and see. So I do hope this all finds you safe, well, and happy with your family, friends, and loved ones. I do hope you're having success and you're not giving up. You got to look at the positives in life and not concentrate on the negatives. And here's one great positive you need to bear in mind. Had this here virus went full bore crazy and shut down our complete food production, growing, processing, canning, shipping, and you had to depend on gardening, because 2020 saw the greatest increase of gardening since World War II. Everybody's going to grow gardens, raise animals, and feed themselves. Well, as far too many have found out, it's just not as easy. It's tearing up some lawns, buying some containers, buying all kinds of expensive amendments and chemicals and fertilizers, and going out and planting food, and it just magically jumps up. And you got more food than you ever realized possible. If it was that darn easy, farmers would never go broke. The more go broke every year, the more that don't. And that brings up the final point. Next time you see a farmer going down the road holding up traffic on his tractor, rather than you're honking your horn or maybe saying a word or two you shouldn't, maybe you should say a little silent prayer for him, wish him well and wish him luck. So, till I Spooky, which is always with me, Speedy's here somewhere, not too far off. Gracie's in the kitchen, waiting on me, because it's getting close to food time. And you can see we got some more dark skies a-coming. It's supposed to rain all night, and I guess most of tomorrow, if not the next day, who knows. Hence the issues I wanted to discuss today. So, y'all be careful out there. Stay well and safe with your family, friends, and loved ones. So old Mr. Tom, Spooky, Speedy, which is here somewhere, like I said, Cleo, which was here for morning chow, Elrod and Magoo, sometimes Mr. Gray, and the white calico. And then we got old Mr. Magoo too, don't forget him. See you on the next video. Goodbye for now. Spooky, I'm wet. Yep. I'm sweaty. It's so darn humid. Every part of me's soggy. You want to come on in? You would. Boy, Speedy surely would be crying all day and all night. Wouldn't you, Speedy? Yes, you would. Oh, let's get some chow rustled up for the kiddies.